Shivaya Namaha.
Om 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 Jnanatirandosya Jnanam Dana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Right, so welcome everyone to Siva Ratri celebration. Whenever we talk about word Shiva, it entails understanding the difference and the union between matter and spirit. I think everybody's seen the cover of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where you have the picture of the spiritual world, and then you have this cloud-like area that's the material world. And the idea is that matter and spirit never really unite. Just like in this body, the spirit soul is there, but at the time of death it leaves. It's not integrated with it. It's animating it. The body itself is just matter. It's not living. At the beginning of the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that there's an inferior energy, which is matter, earth, water, fire, air, ether, even subtle matter, mind, intelligence, and false ego. The next verse he says, but beyond these, there's another energy, which is my superior energy, which are the living entities who animate this material world. So Shiva Ratri is the origin of the realization of Shiva in this material energy. So I want to go from there and kind of explain a little bit about my research and where it comes from. Everybody's heard of the Puranas. The word Purana means ancient or old or history. And the Puranas, all of them, are histories of the universe. And I think most of us have heard the basic structure of how the universe is created. That in the spirit, first of all, we have that material sky, which is in an unmanifest stage called Pradhan. And Mahavishnu, the Supreme Lord from Vaikuntha, glances and impregnates living entities into that material energy and animates it. Much like if you take a seed will sit on a shelf for hundreds and hundreds of years without sprouting. But as soon as you put it into the ground and pour water on it and sunlight, then it germinates what's inside the seed to come out. So similarly, the living beings have desires, and when they're impregnated into the pradhan, it agitates the pradhan, and because of their desires to work and enjoy, and thus the material manifestation comes about. I'm going to read a little bit from Srila Prabhupada's purport, and as we go through it, I'll explain some of the details which explain what's going on. To impregnate with the seeds, this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami. To impregnate with seeds of the living entities, the Lord himself does not directly touch the material energy, but by his specific functional expansion, he touches the material energy, and thus the living entities, who are his spiritual parts and parcels, are impregnated into material nature. Purport. The word svanga, vishesh bhasha, rupe, indicating the form by which the Lord begets living entities in this material world, is explained herein. He is Lord Shiva. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said that Lord Shiva, who is another form of Mahavishnu, is like yogurt. Yogurt is nothing but milk, yet it is not milk. Similarly, Lord Shiva is considered the father of this universe, and material nature is considered the mother. So we've all seen the symbolism of the Shiva Linga, which symbolizes the glance, the Purusha. And the Yoni symbolizes the receiving of that Purusha's energy in the form of material nature, and that's Durga. So another example that helps us kind of visualize how that works is if you have a generating house where electricity is generated, like we do down there in Gainesville, and all that energy goes through different wires out to everybody's homes, and then it comes through the different wires into those light bulbs. The generator itself never comes to everybody's house, but through the wires, that electricity is carried, that energy is carried. That carrier is Lord Shiva, Shambhu. It's not the direct electricity straight from because that's power. It goes through all kinds of transformers and changes its nature from its original coming out of the powerhouse to a way that it can function in each one of the appliances that are electric. Thus, Lord Shiva's position is between that of the living entity and the Supreme Lord. In other words, Lord Shiva is neither the Supreme Personality of Godhead nor a living entity. He is a form through which the Supreme Lord works to beget living entities within this material world. So, on the outside of this planet, there are so many other planets. Outside this universe, there are so many other universes floating in the ocean, causal ocean. They've been glanced upon by Mahavishnu. At the demarcation between material energy and spiritual energy, there's a river. Anybody know the name of that river? Viraj River, correct. Just on the other side of that river is an abode which is eternal. But it's not Vaikuntha, and it's not Goloka Vrindavan. It's Shiva Loka. And this is where Shiva is an eternal being. But he's not a living entity from this Jiva, and he's not the Supreme Lord, Vishnu Tattva. He has his own category of energy called Shiva Tattva. So this Shiva Tattva is what regulates and works its magic to make matter appear alive. We identify thinking I'm alive in this matter, but I'm really not, and when I leave it, that'll be proof, as with every other living entity. As yogurt is prepared with milk and mixed with a culture, the form of Lord Shiva expands when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is in touch with material nature. The impregnation of material nature by the Father, Lord Shiva, is wonderful because at one time, innumerable entities are conceived. So, in each of the Puranas describes this history of how the universes were created and impregnated in material nature. We all know that Garbhodakshay Vishnu lies down in the ocean at the bottom of the universe, and from his navel sprouts, who can say what comes out of Garbhodakshay Vishnu's navel? Pardon?
Lord Brahma.
Lord Brahma, but what's he, did he just pop out?
No, on a lotus.
He's on the top of a lotus. A lotus stem comes out of his navel and goes up to the top of the universe and manifests the flower. Within the stem are all 14 planetary systems. So right now we're in the stem of a lotus flower. And on the top is Lord Brahma. So Lord Brahma is the first created being. When Lord Brahma was manifest, he couldn't understand who he was, how he got there, where he came from. Tried to climb down the stem, couldn't find its beginning, came back up, and he heard this divine sound. Anybody know the sound? Tapa. Oh, good audience tonight. So tapa meant that he did austerities and penances. And then he understood his, this is according to the Skanda Purana and the Linga Purana, not the Bhagavad Purana. It's a little bit different in that sense. So when Lord Brahma appeared, he felt himself all-powerful as the creator of the universe. And then Vishnu manifested, who is the maintainer of the universe. And the two started to argue, actually, about who was superior, the creator or the maintainer. And they started getting so heated in their discussion that the whole universe started to shake. And it caused great disturbance everywhere. So demigods could figure that Lord Shiva could help mitigate and calm them down. So they went to him. And all of a sudden, in between Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu, who were arguing, this huge column of brilliant light, Jyotirlinga, manifested in the universe, and just as far as you could see up and as far as you could see down. Then Lord Shiva manifested from that linga, and he said, to prove who is supreme, one of you go to the top and one of you go to the bottom. Whoever finds the top or the bottom, I will consider supreme. So Lord Vishnu took the form of Varaha and started to dig down. And Lord Brahma got on his swan carrier and started to rise up. Lord Vishnu went down and down and down and down, down and down and down, and never found the end. He couldn't find the end of that because it's all pervading, it's everywhere, and it's ever expansive. So he came back. And Lord Brahma went up. He went as high as he could go with this one carrot, more and more and more. And he came to a place where there was a Kataki flower, but the columns kept going. So he grabbed that flower, and he came back to where Vishnu and Shiva were, and he declared, I found the top, and I picked the flower. But Lord Shiva knew he couldn't have done that, and Lord Vishnu knew he couldn't have done that. So Lord Shiva actually cursed him. He said, I know that you didn't make it to the top, because there is no end to it. That you picked that flower, and you've lied, you've cheated. So therefore you, Lord Brahma, will never be worshipped as a supreme deity. But you, Lord Vishnu, because of your honesty, will be worshipped everywhere. So this is this happened on the Chaturdasi of the Krishna Paksha. Everybody know what Krishna Paksha of the moon means? It's the darkening of the moon. There's Krishna Paksha and Shukla Paksha. When the moon gets bigger and brighter, or when the moon gets darker. Today is Chaturdasi. It's the 14th day. Tomorrow is Amavasya, the dark day of the moon. In the month of Falgun. Who else appeared? What other incarnation of the Lord? Ah, yes. On the Purnim in Falgun. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. So this is the origin of the Shiva Ratri. It happened on this day, that pastime, according to the Shiva Purana and the Linga Purana. Jai Mahadev.
Mahadev is not an ordinary jiva. That's one thing for sure, right? He's actually a Mahajan. Mahajan means great personality. He is one of the spiritual masters of the universe. In fact, he has his own sampradaya, the Rudra sampradaya. And guess what mantra he teaches everyone in his sampradaya to chant? Anyone know?
I forget.
Shri Krishna Saranam Mama. Everyone, Shri Krishna Saranam Mama. Shri Krishna Saranam Mama. That means I surrender to Krishna. So he's the original devotee. He's the head of the sampradaya. So Lord Shiva is also present in the Bhagavatam, in practically every single canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And as has been described, he's not a jiva. He is directly the functioning principle of the Lord in the material world. So I'm going to read a section from the Bhagavatam, a short section that describes, first of all, in other ages, other kalpas, other ages, the kings, the rulers of the universe were actually rishis. They're called Raja Rishis. They were called Raja Rishis. And that meant that they understood their duty to instruct their progeny about the goal of human life. So during one time, this king, Prasanna Bharati, who was the father of the Prachetas, decided that it was time for him to go into the forest and perform austerities, because that is the ultimate end of someone's life who's in the ruling position. We see that manifest in the Pandavas. The Pandavas retire timely. So he wanted to do that, and he was going to hand his kingdom over to his sons, the Prachetas, because they had to go and get purified and perform austerities so that they could rule the kingdom. There were 10,000 sons. So they left the palace and they started to walk into the forest. And who do you think they met? Lord Siva. And they gave their obeisances to Lord Siva, who became their spiritual master. And he instructed them in the goal of human life and how to achieve it. And he sang to them what is known as the Shiva Gita, or the prayers of Lord Shiva in the fourth canto. So they performed those, they took to heart what Lord Shiva was preaching, and they performed austerities for 60,000 years at the bottom of the ocean. Then finally, when they were finished performing those austerities, they got out of the ocean, and who's coming down, riding on Garuda? Lord Vishnu. They paid their obeisances to Lord Vishnu, and they started to offer prayers to Lord Vishnu. And I'm going to read one of those prayers, which is really, really, find it there. Beautiful prayer. This is what they're saying to the Lord. Dear Lord, by virtue of a moment's association with Lord Shiva, who is very dear to you and who is your most intimate friend, we are fortunate to attain you. You are the most expert physician capable of treating the incurable disease of material existence. On account of our great fortune, we have been able to take shelter at your lotus feet. Purport. It has been said, Harim Vina Nashitim Tarante. Without taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot attain relief from the clutches of Maya, the repetition of birth, old age, disease, and death. The Prachetas received the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, by the grace of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is the supreme devotee of the Lord. Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. Everyone, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. The most exalted Vaishnava is Lord Shiva. And those who are actually devotees of Lord Shiva follow Lord Shiva's advice and take shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. The so-called devotees of Lord Shiva, who are simply after material prosperity, are in a way deceived by Lord Shiva. He does not actually deceive them because Lord Shiva has no business deceiving people. But because the so-called devotees of Lord Shiva want to be deceived, Lord Shiva, who is very easily pleased, allows them all kinds of material benedictions. These benedictions might ironically result in the destruction of the so-called devotees. For instance, Ravana took all material benediction from Lord Shiva. But the result was that he was ultimately destroyed with his family, kingdom, and everything else because he misused Lord Shiva's benediction. Because of his material power, he became very proud and puffed up so that he dared kidnap the wife of Lord Ramachandra. In this way, he was ruined. To get material benedictions from Lord Shiva is not difficult. But actually, these are not benedictions. The Prachetas received benediction from Lord Shiva, and as a result, they attained the shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. This is the real benediction. The gopis who worshipped Lord Shiva in Vrindavan, and the Lord is still staying there as who? Gopishwar. Okay, it's the last sentence. The gopis, however, prayed to Lord Shiva to bless them by giving them Lord Krishna as their husband. Okay, that's that. That's just to show how important Lord Shiva is. He is a Vaishnava, and wherever there's Krishna, he wants to be there. So I was just told I don't have a lot of time, but it always drags things out. Okay, I was going to tell a little story I had one time. Actually, when I first became a devotee, I had this far out dream. I saw this being sitting in the sky in Padma Asana. His color was bluish white. He had dreaded locks and even had water coming out of the top of his head. I did not know who this personality was, but he said something to me. He said, "This is not for you. You're a devotee of Krishna." So it's taken me a long time to understand at different levels what he meant. In the beginning, he might have meant one thing, but now I think he meant the whole thing. The whole thing is not for you. It's not for you, this material world. It's not natural. Okay, so, and then one more little story, and then I'm going to read my poem that is about a pastime of Lord Shiva in Vrindavan. So one time we were celebrating Shiva Ratri at Ratna and Nalini's home, and there was a fire yajna, and everybody was throwing rice into the fire, saying Mahadev Swaha, Shambhu Swaha, Nilakanta Swaha, Samapriya Swaha. And I couldn't believe it, because my name is a name for Lord Shiva, which means equal and beloved to everyone. And Lord Shiva is like that. He is equal and beloved to everyone. Everyone can approach him. You can approach him for material things, you'll get one result. But if you approach him in devotion to Krishna, you will get the best result. So now this is a story. This is the last thing. This is a story, a poem that I wrote about a pastime of Lord Shiva in Vrindavan. One day, Lord Shiva came to Nanda's town, covered with ash and hair to the ground, appearing like a ghost floating down the road. He looked like a tantric, a wild abode. All the people ran by just a glance at his face, and nothing could stop his ominous pace. He came to the door of the Queen of Braj, but she just screamed at his camouflage. Protecting her babe, she sent him away, not caring to listen to what he would say. Deep in his heart, he desired to see the Lord he'd been worshiping eternally. Run out of town by the simple village folk, though he could destroy them with one simple stroke. When Lord Shiva left, Krishna started to cry. He would not stop, and no one knew why. King Nanda came home, and he could attest an offense to a Brahmin or an honored guest. He looked at his wife and saw her dismay, and asked, "Has someone come here who you turned away?" Yasoda held her head down, and feeling so bad, she sent out a search for the one who looked mad. Her babe wouldn't stop crying all day until the yogi returned. Then he started to play. When their eyes met, love filled all space. Everyone was happy in the whole human race. And from that day on, when her little boy eats, Yasoda gives Shiva what's left of his treats. Hare Krishna. Just want to say real quick that that's the service that's going on here. Hita makes an offering to Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, and then after it's offered, she brings it out and offers to Lord Shiva. So this one little pastime has developed into a whole life of devotion. Thank you.